Hey, welcome to episode 13 of the War Journal podcast. Today we have a very special guest.
Special, all right.
Major General Gregory Knight. Major General Knight is the tag, and if people don't understand what a tag is, that's the Adjutant General for the Vermont National Guard. General Knight is, I would say, he has a very unique background and history, and we've been talking for a while, and our paths are very similar. And he has 42 years of service, active duty and guard time, with 13 years as an enlisted person in the Coast Guard, and then time as a police officer in Vermont, and then joining the National Guard. And he's got some really great stories, great experiences, and we're going to jump into all of those. And thanks for coming here today.
Really I appreciate the opportunity, Jim.
Yeah, that's great. Anyway, I want to start off by talking about how we met, which is a really funny story. I was a +1 at the National Guard ball with Chelsea, and I see General Knight. He's doing his thing out there. He's talking to people, politicking, and I see you hand a coin to this woman. I forget who she was, and I saw the whole thing, and I was like kind of laughing. I was like, "Damn, that is the biggest challenge coin I've ever seen in my life." So I walked up to General Knight and said, "Hey, sir." We had a couple of drinks too, and I was like, "Are you compensating for something because of the size of your coin?" And I think at that moment we kind of connected, and then we were flying back, and we sat next to each other on the plane ride back, and we talked for almost the entire flight. And at that point, I asked if there's anything I could do to help, and going from there, we created that report for the Vermont National Guard, and I've been trying to help you ever since, and trying to help the Guard. But if you got that coin, you got to see this thing. You got one on you?
We'll break it out. What do we have? So that's the coin. It's not that big, but I remember when I got my first run of coins. When I got this job, they came out. They look like tiddlywinks. They came out like the size of I don't know, like a Susan B. Anthony dollar. I'm like, what is that? So we went a little bigger this time.
That is an impressive coin.
Yes, yeah. And and unlike many coins, this one actually has a story, which I can share with you if you'd like.
Yeah, please do.
So on the front of the coin is a symbol of office for the Vermont Adjutant General, and then it's the back of the coin. It's got our 06 commands represented, and it's presented for excellence. But at the top of the coin, it has the first part of the order issued by General John Sedgwick, who was the commander of the 6th U.S. Corps, leading up to the Battle of Gettysburg. And the 6th Corps was in Marshfield, Maryland, that first week of July 1863, 37 miles away from the Gettysburg battlefield. And the scouts came in and gave the word to General Sedgwick that you need to move the Corps and get them into the fight, which meant a 37-mile forced march. And it was then that General Sedgwick issued the order, put the Vermonters ahead, and keep the column well closed, because he knew, and you can look up our history in the Civil War, Vermonters have a reputation for hard marching and never running from a fight. So speaking of that, it would be appropriate to present you the coin and thank you for being such a great friend and helping us become better.
I appreciate this, and I'll put this in my coin collection, and obviously it will be bigger than most of the other ones I have. But thank you very much.
Absolutely.
And in return, I gave you a copy of the book, and I hope you enjoy it, and I hope it gives you resilience and strength that you don't need in some of the challenging times in your life. I think
there've been a few.
Yeah. Anyway, let's get this thing going, and sir, you've done a lot in your career, and not many people understand the role of the Guard, and they don't understand being activated and doing what you do. And I really want to talk about your deployment to Ramadi in 2005 and 2006, because that deployment, and you shared some of the things that happened on the deployment, really gives you insights into the topic that we're going to discuss, is mental health issues and PTSD and suicide and things like that. So if you can, tell us a little about your time in Ramadi as the battle captain.
I'll give you a little bit of a prologue. So at the time we were an armored battalion. We had an armored brigade in Vermont, and our battalion was earmarked to go to Ramadi, became part of a multi-state brigade under the headquarters of the 2nd Brigade, 28th Division. We had a number of Pennsylvania units, 1st 109th, 1st 110th, 1st and 104th Cav out of Philly. At the end of our deployment to Ramadi, there were 36 states and territories within our brigade. We were a large battalion towards the end, but I remember very distinctly it was validating, but you were excited, you were nervous, some trepidation, and then when you really started looking at the scale of things, and then the unit that we were going to rip with, they had a tough go. And that's what you're going into. And you can go back and look it up, but at that period of history, Ramadi was the most dangerous city in the world. That's what we were going into. So a long deployment, we were mobilized for 18 months. We did 5 months of post-mobilization training at Camp Shelby. To be perfectly blunt, it was excruciating. Not convinced it was all that necessary. And I think that's a misnomer. People think that this whole weekend warrior narrative that's out there, that's trite. That's not true. We're as ready as any organization in the military. It's our job. It's what we do. Standards are the same. Training is the same. Equipment, ideally, should be the same. But that element of the deployment did pay dividends for us because, as you know, especially when you go overseas, you can't discount the importance of relationships and networking and who can do what for you. So I was a battle captain, and for those that aren't familiar with what a battle captain is, in the Army it's the equivalent of the Command Operations Center, the COC. So we call it a TOC, and I was in essence a battlefield manager. And so not so much outside the wire doing patrols like that, like most of our folks did, but it's a very busy place. So, and there's no handbook on how to be a battle captain. So you figured it out pretty quick, and you learn things. And that was the other benefit of the deployment, of the pre-deployment training, post-mobilization training. We went to NTC, which sucked entirely. It was horrid. I'd never been so dehydrated in my life. It was a lot of funny stories that go with that, but I learned things because of the units we were working with. Some of the cadre would come in, the supporting cadre, not the OCs, the observer, controller, trainers. That's a whole other story. But some of the folks who were the support staff would come in and go, "Hey man, do you know how to do an air tasking order?" I was an air tasking order. Well, in like 10 minutes, I know now how to do an air tasking order. And it paid huge dividends when I got overseas. And that was simply a 10-minute conversation with a Kiowa pilot. And she came in and she said, "Hey man, I really want to help you guys." So those are the kind of relationships that 6-month post-mobilization training did help us with. But we got overseas. You knew you were going into the shit. It was no kidding. I remember I went on the advance because I'm one of those folks, I can't stand, funny I say this, I can't stand living vicariously and listening to a report from somebody else about what they're seeing on the post-deployment site survey. So we get there, and I remember we walked into the outgoing unit's talk, and in the foyer they had their sentry there, and then they had on the wall 16 of their soldiers that had been killed. The wall of honor. And I was, that's not normal, right? I was dumbfounded. And I'm like, holy shit! They lost 16 guys, and Captain Matt Stevens, our physician's assistant, was with me, and I'll never forget it, Jim. He said, "Oh, we'll lose 16." And I was like, "How do you figure? How do you know?" He goes, "I just think we'll lose 16." And no shit, we lost 16. As a deployment, I don't know if I would say it was a capstone experience in my career. I had things that I'd read about, things that we talked about going through your professional military education, but I had more combat power at my fingertips, a phone call away. We were there probably 3 months. We were incredibly busy, and I think everybody was probably shocked how incredibly kinetic a deployment it was. Our battalion, the folks that were out doing the job, in a year were hit with 350 IEDs. We got mortared and rocketed on the base, I don't know, what the radar required, 262 times that I recall. The small caliber stuff was either under the radar fan or in and out, before it registered. But and again, the most profound thing for me was sending my friends home under the American flag. And that's why I get a little resentful when people start making a distinction between, oh, you're just National Guard. Well, you know what I find interesting? So I was in the operations center on the radio over 100 times for troops in contact, and it wasn't just Army. It was Navy SEALs. It was convoys transiting through on the MSR. It was the Ranger Bat would go in and try to pick up bad guys. Somebody would be in contact somewhere. Well, my job is to help you. If you're calling me for help, I jump to that guy's push, and I'm talking to the platoon leader, platoon sergeant on the ground. What do you need? Not one time did they call me and say, hey, boy, what kind of unit are you? We're really hoping for some more active duty guys. I really was hoping for some recon Marines to come help us. They didn't care who was coming to get them. Because when I'm not telling you anything, when you get in that environment, you're all in, man. You're all one team. And all of that garbage goes out the window. The Guard versus active versus whatever, Marine versus Army. Nobody cared.
Yeah.
Nobody cared.
It's funny, like I was on the other end of the spectrum. I was out forward deployed, and I'm the one who was calling into you. And I remember, through my deployments, those calls back to the TOC, and talking to whoever was on the line, and it never crossed my mind for an instant,
No.
whether it was rank or what service component or whether they were National Guard or active duty. It didn't matter, because when you're in contact and you need either close air support or you need whatever, it didn't matter. And it was, you're on the radio and you didn't really care.
Yep.
Our experiences were different, being on the one side to the other, but I think the one thing that we can both agree upon is day one you get into your seat and all of a sudden the shit hits the fan and you are living it, and going from the training to now without any ramp up being in it, and then having and seeing troops being killed and dying. How did that impact you looking back on it now?
I think initially, it's human nature. You're shocked. Like I would give you a case in point. I won't mention the soldier's name out of respect for the family, but soldier goes out and was an embedded trainer with the Iraqi battalion, one of the Iraqi battalions, and he was happy in his work. He came in and talked to me. I gave him the pre-brief. Hey, what's your con up? And 20 minutes later, he's dead, shot by a sniper. So one of my additional duties was kind of be the forensic investigator. I had that law enforcement background, so I have some rudimentary investigative knowledge, and I would have to go out and try to triage what happened. So you're looking at the bodies of your colleagues, right? A bullet came in here and exited the right side. Okay, so the sniper knows where he's shooting. He was shooting for the weak point in the body armor. Where was he standing? What direction was he facing? Okay, now you're going to simply triangulate and say it probably came from that series of apartments or buildings. That happened a few times. That ain't normal. It's you don't come back from that and you get inured to it. You have to. You can't just fold up like a cheap tent. I understand, but I wasn't out. I wasn't pulling triggers, man. I didn't have that kind of stress. Whatever stress that I had was vicarious, right? I fought my war on a radio. That was my weapon, and everything I did was to keep my guys safe. You have to. You got to know your battle space. You got to know who's where. Down to the gnat's ass detail, as you know. Blood type, weapons nomenclature. Where are they on what's your 10-digit grid? If you're going to call for indirect fire or CAS, whatever it is I'm calling for. Rotary wing. I never in my life thought I'd be using Super Cobras and Huey gunships, which is cool, by the way.
Little birds are the best.
But yeah.
Little birds are the best.
But all that being said, what I experienced was, small time compared to what the guys out, the soldiers that were out doing the job. And every day. And that's one of the things that, I don't know, people who've never served don't get it. I don't mean to offend anybody, but I also don't care. When you know the danger you're facing, and your nation's asked you to do a job, and you go out and you do it anyway, it's humbling to be around people like that. But that being said, and I believe this, it doesn't matter whether you had a kinetic deployment like we did, or you're stuck in whatever, Saudi, someplace in CENTCOM, or Horn of Africa, or whatever. You're away from home for a year. You don't come back the same. It's different. Your kids have changed. Your spouse has changed. You've changed. And when you come back from someplace like Ramadi, it's just never far from my thoughts. I don't dwell on it. I don't have nightmares. But you're not the same. And I knew, it was funny. So Colonel Coffin, he since retired, he was our guard psychiatrist for the brigade, state psychiatrist actually. And he came down to Camp Shelby when we're demoted. Now understand, I'm not telling you anything, and anybody else who's been deployed knows the deal. Basically for the guard, you come back to a demote site. Okay, like 24 hours earlier, I was on a CH-46 flying to Takatam Air Base, or a CH-47. Most beautiful sight I'd ever seen. It was a full moon over the Euphrates, looking out the ramp and seeing the moon in the windscreen of the Chinook behind us. I mean, I was like, thank God, we're done. And then you go to Kuwait, and you sit in Kuwait for a couple of days, but then finally get to Camp Shelby. And it's not hyperbole to say that Iraq it's literally physically in you. 3 days later, hot showers, clean sheets, you blow your nose, it's brown.
Yeah.
You wipe your face with a baby wipe, it's brown. It's oozing out of your body. So it's physical, it's mental.
Well, there's this saying for Afghanistan, and it's the sand in Afghanistan. You can never get the sand from out underneath your fingernails, and I think that is something that everybody experiences. One of the things, when I returned from Desertstorm, 7 days later, I was out of the Marine Corps, and didn't have time to process anything. And then my Afghan tours were different, where I would go through. It was Desertstorm in 1991. They didn't have a lot of the mental health stuff. They didn't have anything. And then my times that I came back from Afghanistan, each time I would have a post-deployment, brief and, do a psych eval. So, and then you get your clean bill of health and then you're off again. But you really don't understand the impact that it has on you until later on. Sometimes it takes months or years. And you saw the interview with Brian. It took him years to get with that. My question to you is, do you have any, being a battle captain and seeing what's happening, having troops die, and where I'm on the other end, do you have any survivor's guilt or PTSD that you realize or understand now? And if so, how do you do it?
That's a great question, Jim. There are times. Let me go back to Colonel Coffin. He told us to your earlier point. He told us at Camp Shelby, he put us in a big room, he's going to debrief us by whatever size, 20 or 30 guys, right? So I'm in there with my RTOs, some of the platoon guys. And nobody's saying anything. We're not going to share our deepest, darkest secrets with you. Thanks for the try.
Yeah.
So I talked to Doc Coffin. I'm like, hey, Doc, we ain't going to say shit to you, man. Suffice it to say we saw bad things. Some guys saw far worse things than I did. We laughed at some pretty messed up things. I got a whole story about that if I can tell it later. But what he did say was, keep track of yourself. And whatever's going to happen will very likely manifest in 5 or 6 months. And here's what it looks like. So it was almost 6 months to the day. I got back to work, went on leave in Maine, hung out at the beach, drank a lot of beer, and then went back to work. I'm good. But you're not good. You don't know that. But people see it. And my wife saw it. My kids certainly saw it. Anger management issues, super short-tempered, very little patience for dumb shit, and we've talked about all the dumb shit that we deal with, the pole vaulting over mouse turds and the bureaucratic nonsense. So I had no patience for that, right? Because I just come from a place where, I'm sending medevacs out and QRFs, and I've got people that I'm listening to them in a firefight in the radio. Right? That's kind of important. And you come back to, hey, your cyclic inventory is late. Shut up. So, but I finally called Colonel Coffin. And I said, Doc, this is, all right, what do I do? He said, go to the vet center. And I went and I talked to the counselor there, 2 tours, 25th ID in Vietnam, kind of a no-nonsense guy. And I've been going there on and off ever since. That works for me. That may not work for everybody.
Yeah. Was that a difficult decision for you?
Surprisingly not. It's like the you got to take the first step.
Yeah.
Talking to Colonel Coffin was not. He was that kind of he's a soldier. He loves soldiers. So, and that was apparent. So I was very comfortable talking to him. And then, we're fortunate in Vermont. We've got a great vet center. We've got fantastic counselors. They're very welcoming. There's no judgment. Now, I would tell anybody, and I would tell anybody who's listening, you find out what works for you. Right? Go to the vet center. If that works for me, that's fine. But understand, you go to the vet center, it's confidential. It is not anonymous. So now I've become very comfortable sharing my story. Because if and we'll talk a little more about that, but to your question, probably when I got back, I had some survivor's guilt. Could I have done more? Would things have been different had I been on shift, if it was another battle captain? People out in the field are doing they're going to do what their instincts tell them to do. Right. I could say, negative, I need you to, wave off and we'll, get to kill our effort. I'm not the guy on the ground. That leader, that platoon sergeant, they got to make a decision. I can't. So I kind of put that away. I'm like, no. I don't have regrets about that. I probably did early on, but there's still something that it eats at you. Yeah. Because I did come home.
What about, we talk about survivor's guilt and PTSD and things like that, and I've never really opened up about my experiences. I use the book to do that, and then I'll talk about it. But for me, I've finally realized the PTSD that I have, and you briefly said, I don't have nightmares, and I don't have flashbacks, and I don't have this and that, and I think we're very similar, nor do I. My PTSD manifests in different ways, memory loss and things like that. I mean, it took me a while to figure out what that PTSD was and how it manifested and then how it impacted my life, my relationships. You mind sharing, with your PTSD experience, how that manifested and how it impacted you, and then most importantly, how you were able to overcome it and continue your career?
Yeah, and to me, at least in my case, the PTSD or adjustment disorder, whatever you want to call it, I initially was very angry. I had short temper with my kids. I had zero tolerance for bullshit. I didn't find a lot of humor in things, because whatever humor, very black humor when you're overseas doing that thing in that kind of environment. And I got home and I don't know, it just, for a little while there, kind of took the air out of me. And you wanted things to be normal. And I couldn't figure out why things weren't what they were. It wasn't my wife, it wasn't my kids, it was me. So that was the big thing that kind of manifested for me. I had a few, early when I got back, I had a few bad dreams about it. Nothing, I think any type of traumatic experience like that's going to affect you to some degree. So most of it I parked, but there was something different in me that other people could see. And that's what drove me to go to Colonel Coffin and then go to the vet center. Militarily, as an organization, as a military, I think we've done a very poor job addressing the stigma. We don't talk about it enough. When people are either afraid or ashamed or they're so career-minded, they refuse to go because they're worried it's going to impact my career.
Yeah, especially in career fields like intelligence or special forces, which kind of is a great segue to the next thing I want to talk about. We hear a lot of lip service, here to support your veterans and, thank you for your service, and mental health issues and men's crisis and suicide awareness and 22 a day, and let's do a ruck march and let's do all this bullshit. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, even the service components, DOD, everybody still struggles with this. And the latest initiative, IPPW, DOD directive, basically with the idea of finding solutions for mental health issues, substance abuse, all of these things, and the Guard is getting it crammed down their throat. Mm-hmm. And we talk about, this program and what the Guard's doing and what individual units are doing. Give me your take on what you think the solution should be, and do you think IPPW is going to actually do anything?
I think it's a tool. I'll give you my perspective, right? So anybody who's listening who's been in the military realizes that and particularly to the Guard, there are 54 states, territories in Washington, D.C. There are 54 guards, 54 adjutants general, 54 sergeants major, chief master sergeants. It's just different. What works here is not going to work in South Dakota or Texas, or pick a state. So you can, and there's some goodness in this. So do I think the IPPW is some magic solution? Yeah, absolutely not. Magic solution is what I mentioned, is getting rid of the stigma, getting people comfortable with talking about it, right? So I'm a senior leader. If I can't talk about it, well then that's just dumb. What am I ashamed of? I got myself better. The IPPW, and here's the shortcoming. Well, maybe it's a good thing. I don't know, Jim. It doesn't come with a handbook, right? Here's your integrated primary prevention workforce handbook, and here's how you're going to build your thing. Okay. Do we need one? Maybe. I mean, I've got some great folks. You've met them. I mean, they're kind of building the plane as they're trying to fly it, which is, there's no guidelines. And maybe that's okay. Maybe they're building it based on their expertise and their focus, because they have been, at least my lead has been in Vermont in the Guard for a long time, so he kind of knows the organization. Can it get us to the left of issues? And that's my primary interest as a leader, senior leader, should be anybody's interest as a leader. Get to the left of an issue, right? What are you doing to identify the indicators? What are you doing to mitigate the indicators? And how do we get at that more effectively? And you look at the work that you're doing, which is why I'm so interested in it, right? I've got something where I can unobtrusively reach in and get a sensing of what's going on in my organization. And I can find out maybe where some of the friction points are. What are the concerns? What are the things that are causing retention issues or causing stress within family? And I can take that and combine it with a unit risk inventory. And then we can talk about the DEOC survey, if you haven't taken a DEOC survey, boy. So, and I will be a pariah to some. I don't have a whole lot of use for surveys, right? I think people are surveyed out, to be perfectly honest, depending on the survey. But if I'm a leader looking at a survey, as an example, I'm not sure how it, across DOD, but I can tell you across the National Guard, the overall participation rate in the DOD or the DEOC survey is 37.5%. So Jim, as a leader, would you make a decision changing something in your organization because 37.5% of the people said this is good or bad or whatever?
No, sample size is inaccurate, and moreover, people are taking surveys, like you said, they're surveyed out, and they're not going to answer honestly. And I think one of the things that our analysis really uncovered or revealed was the fact that people were more open to speak on channels like Reddit or and social media because they knew they were protected conversations, and
right.
They're not open and honest.
Okay, so then follow that. Which percentage? Okay, small percentage. In Vermont, we did okay. We had 50%, I think, the ballpark. What 50% am I getting?
Right.
The happy, the bitter, the benign. I'm just going through the motions here, right? That's a crappy way to try to make a decision to make your organization better. So it's a tool, but it's not a standalone.
Right.
Which is why I hope what the IPPW does, when we get yours off the ground, I will have multiple tools. We, the command teams, because I'm trying to build something that goes beyond me.
Right.
Right? And we can change culture. Right? Adjutants, generals, senior leaders, commanders, first sergeants, you can change the climate in your organization. If we're trying to change a culture and rebuild esprit de corps and get people comfortable talking about mental health, right? Are you going to be honest on an anonymous survey about your mental health status?
No.
You're not going to talk about it. No. You're probably not going to answer the question.
No.
So again, kind of comes full circle. And here's the bigger challenge. And we talked about this a little bit. It's probably a question for anybody out there. So it was NPR that did a few weeks ago. They did a report on I think it was focused on active duty, but talking about how active duty installations are in healthcare deserts. Okay, you want to see a healthcare desert? Come to Vermont. Go to many Guard states, rural states.
Wyoming. Huge problem.
Yes. Northern New Hampshire. I mean, it's the Dakotas. If you're not near a city center, but then the problem becomes compounding, and I've had this conversation with many folks. TRICARE is a remarkable benefit.
Right.
Now, ideally, if you're active duty, you don't pay for TRICARE. If you're in the Guard, you're a drilling member, you pay. I think that's bullshit.
Yeah, and this is one of the things I really wanted to talk about, and I'm glad you brought it up, because most people don't understand the benefits and privileges that are afforded to active duty retirees. You don't get the same thing in the Guard.
Nope.
And if you can talk a little about that, help people understand that the Guard is a very unique organization.
Mm-hmm.
And it has multiple masters, and it's pulled in 20 different directions, and people really don't realize what the Guard does and the important role it plays in supporting combat operations. I told you how many tail things I looked at with Guard emblems on it, and I'm flying on C-141s and C-130s.
Mm-hmm.
And they do all this great work, and then they go back to their Guard units, and they're second-rate citizens in a way, with their medical service, their TRICARE, and talk a little about that, because I don't think many people realize that.
No, and this is something that General Hokanson, he's retiring, he's done wonderful work for the Guard. So if you're not familiar with the National Guard, one, if you're between the ages of 17 and 42, go find a recruiter and learn about the Guard, because we can sure use the help.
Recruiting pitch.
So, but 2/3 of our organization is part-time.
Right.
That's 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year. Now, ish, right? Because we have to do professional military education. Sometimes you get put on orders. Sometimes you could do state partnership program events. But in the end, we do deploy. And the Air Guard and the Army Guard are on different deployment cycles, and sometimes you get a short notice call and you go do the thing. Title 10, active duty, you probably have a troop medical clinic.
Right.
You go get your teeth cleaned. You have an exchange. You have a commissary. You have all the infrastructure that you need, all the life services that you need. You want to buy a can of chew and get a 12-pack and fill your car, then you go to the quick stop. Tax free, and go to the quick stop. Right. You're in the Guard. Well, that's great. If you happen to be on orders at Fort Drum, or I drove up to Fort Meade today to visit one of my units who are doing some work there. I got a haircut because I know it's going to be on the podcast.
And you only have to pay $12 for it.
That's correct. But we don't. The Guard, like I said, healthcare desert. It's not just. It's a resource desert. We don't have exchanges. We don't have commissaries. We don't have all that. We come home, and we go back to work. 2/3 of us, and then those active Guard and Reserve and the federal technicians that are the full-time force. We exist to make things happen for the traditional drilling member, to get them to school, to get them paid. The challenge we have, especially in Vermont and other rural states, this is not just a Vermont problem. It all ties back to mental health, for instance. Hey, I want you to go get help. There's no shame in it. You can go to the vet center, which is what I did. You can go find a provider, and that's when it becomes good luck. Because TRICARE, as wonderful as it is, so I think if you're single, it's like $50 a month for TRICARE.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty good. It's a family, it's about $250 for the family plan. Try to find a provider that accepts TRICARE, that's in the network. Try to find a provider taking new patients. You're going to have a hard time. Family practice is one thing. You try to find somebody in the mental health field who is taking new patients, accepts TRICARE, and specializes in PTSD, anxiety, or adjustment disorder, things that military or law enforcement, first responders have to deal with. Good luck is right. Yeah. So we don't have enough providers. So I don't have the answer, but it's remarkably frustrating. And I know we could make a difference for folks. Get after the stigma. It is not career ending. I went to the vet center when I was still a captain, and now I'm not. Yeah. Right. So my career did not end.
Right.
Right. That was my route, and I think part of that stigma is fed. It's a perception. And they're not wrong. We've done this to ourselves. And I'm not sure how it works in other services, but for us, if you go see a medical provider, you've got your pulleys, right? Your pulmonary, upper, lower, hearing, eyes, and psych is an S, which is okay. Yeah. Whatever. When you get the scarlet letter, oh man, yeah. yeah, we're going to have to get you checked, and in the meantime, you're not deployable.
Right.
You are 3 or 4 in psych. Well, then who says you're better? Right? Who says you are back to a ready deployable status? Hey, what if you're on meds?
Yeah.
Are you deployable now? What if you can take the meds with you? I don't know. What happens is, oh yeah, we got to put you in the medical evaluation board. Hey, you got over 15 years service, you're qualified for medical retirement. Get you through the physical evaluation board, and good luck, God bless. You separate the people from the very thing that they want to be a part of.
Yeah,
you separate them from the resources, their purpose for being here.
Yeah.
When we in fact broke them, that doesn't make any sense. So I don't know if I'm a champion, but I've certainly been vocal about it.
Right.
And I would share that story with anybody. Get your head checked.
Yeah.
However you have to do that.
I think there's one thing that I've seen through the analysis and the reports and my own personal experiences, that active duty retirees, you have this network, and I was concerned with myself, starting my business and how that might impact me. But you're in the Guard and you're going through this, and you probably want to talk to somebody in the military. Like for me, I was definitely more comfortable talking to somebody in the military, talking to another battle buddy, talking to somebody who has that shared experience. But now you're in the Guard, and now you got to go see a provider outsourced. It doesn't have the same worldview. And then you have not only you're dealing with the Guard issues and how that might impact your career, but now your typical job or your daily job and how that is going to. So you have another variable in the Guard that you don't have on active duty.
Yep.
And I can see how that will definitely impact your decision to ask for help or seek help.
And what does it do to your security clearance? Right? That probably gets parked.
Yeah, on hold.
Yep. So it's a thorny problem. I don't know yet how to fix it, but I'm certainly going to keep working with our congressional delegation. I don't know how to incentivize people to go out to rural states. Maybe that's part of the residency. I don't know how they do the sorting hat thing for what resident goes to what hospital. But if you mentioned it, if we're serious about this, right? I have no use for lip service. I have no use for empty promises. You do the best you can, right, to at least try to deliver what you said you're going to deliver.
Yeah.
But I'm all done with catchphrases and buzzwords. And what's your term for it?
22 push-ups a day and all the.
What was your? If you have it inside the Beltway term, it was buzzword bingo. Buzzword bingo.
Buzzword
yeah.
bingo.
So I prefer plain spoken, and I don't have time or interest to deal with it. I'm not worried about hurt feelings at this point in my career.
Well, you're Teflon. You don't have to worry about it at this point.
Teflon I am, but in my view, and I hope it never happens to people, but there are times it will come home to roost, and it gets pretty close to home. I've been very fortunate in my family, but as an adjutant general, when I have to call my governor and tell them that I had 2 suicides the same day, 1 Air Guard, 1 Army Guard. In one case, the command team, the commander, did the right thing, identified the problem, knew there was an issue, got that kid in front of the chapel, and it was simply not enough. Mm-hmm. And the next day he killed himself. The other one, indicators were there. And you can do all the ask, care, escort training you want. It is a tough conversation to have with somebody. But individually, folks saw the indicators. They saw the isolation. They saw the drinking. They saw the dark humor. They saw the late to work. All of the indicators, and nobody put 2 and 2 together until he killed himself. So, yeah, that hurts. And it's the ripple effect within the organization. And the Air Force, I think it was the Air Force, Air Guard, I got to find it, they did a really good briefing about the true impact of suicide. And it's just the ripple and how many people are actually impacted by that event.
Yeah, direct and indirectly.
Yep.
And I don't think it's hard to quantify. I mean, we did an analysis for Shaw Air Force Base after their uptick in suicides, and
yeah, that's why I saw the one you did for the Marine Corps.
The stand down and how that had negative implications.
Yes, that's the last thing you need.
Yeah, you're pulling people out of what they're doing, and you're letting them focus on this. So, I want to end on a positive note. This is a very dark subject, and a lot of people don't want to talk about it, and it's a difficult discussion. And for me, it was been a difficult discussion for 20 years, and it's only the past, since writing the book, being able to talk about it openly. You have been very open about it, throughout your career, which is very good. I think it sends a great message for the Vermont National Guard and your troops. What do you want to tell people within the Guard, within your unit, nationally, just anybody, veterans, active duty? What's your message? What do you want to tell them? You got an opportunity to, not as a politician, not as a tag, not as anything, but just as Greg Knight.
As I've matured in my career, and I will tell this.
Very mature.
Very, quite mature. Yeah, I can't trust a fart. So I would tell anybody who serves in uniform, irrespective of your service, irrespective of component, the work we do is important, right? And I have a hard time getting past all this bullshit narrative, this vitriol that's out there. When anybody in uniform knows, you don't have to look very far to find incredible goodness in our nation, incredible goodness in our formations. There's so much talent in our military. Just the potential is there, and for the life of me, I don't understand why people choose. It's a choice. Choose not to serve. So for anybody out there who's serving, a sincere thanks for doing it. This is not the hollow, see you in the grocery store parking lot, thank you for your service. You know what you're thanking me for.
Right.
I appreciate it, certainly well-meaning. But thank you. And here's where you're different. I would tell anybody in uniform this. It's not convenient, right? We understand the stresses on our families, personal stress, the inconvenience that comes with it, the deployments. If you're a traditional drilling member of the Guard, it takes you away from your family. You're giving up at least 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year. You do get deployed. And it's hard on employers. It's hard if you're a student. You're missing school. And knowing all of that, everybody in uniform said, I will serve. Now, to me, that speaks volumes about the character of people that serve in uniform in our country. So that's what I would say, Jim. It's just been, to me, I probably didn't think about it 20 years ago. But now, looking back at my career, it has been an absolute honor and privilege to serve with folks that choose to do what they do and serve their nation. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I would concur. I was afforded opportunities that I would have never had if I didn't join the military. And those experiences shaped my identity. They formed my character. They created the man that I am today. But with some, residual effects.
Sure.
And I would never change a minute of
Nope.
it.
And to me, looking back, again, probably didn't feel like it at the time, but and not to be crass about it, but that's kind of the price of admission. You got to know what you're getting into. And military service is simply not for everybody.
It's not, but I think that for me as a young man, I benefited immensely from it. And that I think that a lot of today's youth can benefit from it. It's just you have to be able to take that challenge or decision. Yep. And it's a lot of, the fortitude that you have. And I don't see it a lot in our youth today. And I hope that changes. And I hope that they take the opportunity, because it is a gift. It is an opportunity.
Yeah. I think we've got to do a better job sharing the story. In my view, it's a hijacked narrative. Some of it's inadvertent, because I think it's by organizations that are doing the right thing. Tunnels to Towers, Wounded Warriors, Camp Lejeune Water. All the messaging about service in the military is negative. Yeah. And that's absolute garbage. I mean, I would use myself as an example. Where else could a kid join as an E1 with no college? And because of the opportunities put in front of them, become a 2-star general with a bachelor's degree, 2 master's degrees, and no college debt. All I did was take the opportunity when they came, and this is something else that many of the folks listening will know, as you do, you have the right person in your career pushing you into some place that maybe that's not the job I want, but they see something in you that you don't see in yourself. And unfortunately, I didn't realize it until too late. The late Brigadier General Mike Heston, for instance, died of pancreatic cancer after 3 tours in Afghanistan. He was that senior leader for me. You're going to go do this job. I don't want to do that job. You're not hearing me.
You need to do that job.
You need to do that job.
You know, it's a shame. I wish I had a leader like you when I was a junior enlisted person and when I was a junior officer. I had poor mentors, and you know, with the right guidance, I would have been a 2-star like you. But that's what life is, and I will give you a piece of advice. Get your TikTok channel, start talking.
Yeah.
Get out there and
Yeah.
use your voice. People will follow you. People will listen to you because you are like them. You know, I've met a lot of officers. I worked for General Petraeus. I worked for General McChrystal. I've worked for 4-star admirals. And having somebody who's down to earth, somebody you can talk to, somebody you're comfortable with, it means a lot. And like I said, use your platform, but use your voice. Get on those social media channels. You know, this podcast was probably, you know, a great thing, and I'll do everything I can to promote it, help you, help the Guard, help Vermont, help Wyoming. But I really appreciate you coming today. It means a lot to me.
Yeah, appreciate the opportunity, Jim.
And I
keep telling the story.
I promise I will get with my design team, and I'm going to get you something a little smaller, a little more impactful. I mean, this thing, I could hurt somebody with this.
It's good.
It is actually a really cool coin.
Just don't want you to misplace it.
A little large, smaller than a manhole cover, but
well, finally you can say you've got something big.
We're going to keep this PG.
Yeah, there you go.
But sir, listen, thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Man hug. Hey,
Good
listen, I'm going to end with, I really would appreciate everyone watching to share this. I think it will help benefit a lot of people who need the help. It's a powerful story, and check out General Knight in Vermont National Guard. He's a great guy and great mission, and they're doing God's work.